My name is Natalie. I am 33 years old, and I work as a financial risk auditor for one of the largest healthcare conglomerates on the East Coast. I lay paralyzed in a trauma unit needing emergency spinal surgery, but my own mother ignored 15 urgent calls from the hospital. She was too busy dealing with my sister, who was having a full meltdown over the wrong shade of velvet curtains being delivered for a housewarming party. So I used the last ounce of my strength to call my corporate lawyer to the intensive care unit and took absolutely everything they owned. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to cut off toxic family members to protect your own peace and survive. My entire career is built on assessing disasters, calculating liabilities, and preparing for worst-case scenarios. But nothing could have ever prepared me for the catastrophic failure of the people who were supposed to be my ultimate safety net. The rhythmic mechanical beeping of a hospital heart monitor was the very first thing that anchored me back to reality. It was a sharp, clinical sound that pierced right through the heavy and confusing fog in my brain. I tried to open my eyes, but my eyelids felt like they were weighted down with solid lead. When I finally managed to peel them open, the harsh fluorescent lights of the intensive care unit blinded me instantly, causing me to wince. I tried to turn my head to take in my surroundings, and a wave of pure white-hot agony shot down my neck, radiating all the way through my spine. I gasped hard, the sound catching awkwardly in the plastic oxygen mask that was securely strapped over my face. "Do not move, Natalie. You need to stay perfectly still right now." A face swam into my blurred field of vision. It was a tall man in blue surgical scrubs looking down at me with a grim but highly practiced expression. His hospital badge read, "Dr. Thorne Trauma Surgery." "What happened?" I asked. My voice was a raspy croak scraping painfully against my bone-dry throat. "You were in a severe multi-car collision on Interstate 95. Dr. Thorne explained, his tone remarkably steady, but carrying a heavy, undeniable urgency. "A commercial semi-truck hydroplaned in the heavy rain and brutally clipped the back of your sedan. You were pushed directly into the concrete median at 70 miles per hour. You are incredibly lucky to be alive right now." Flashes of memory violently intruded my mind right then, the torrential downpour making the highway slick and dangerous. The sudden blinding glare of massive headlights filling my rearview mirror. The deafening screech of twisting metal tearing apart, the shattering of safety glass flying everywhere, and then just absolute silent darkness. My legs. I panicked, trying desperately to shift my weight in the narrow hospital bed. I could not feel my toes at all. No tingling, no pressure, just a terrifying void where my lower body used to be. A cold, absolute terror seized my chest, making it incredibly difficult to breathe, even with the oxygen mask pressing tightly against my nose and mouth. "I cannot feel my legs," I whispered again, my voice cracking with desperation. "Listen to me carefully," Dr. Thorne said, placing a warm, gloved hand gently on my shoulder to keep me grounded in the terrifying moment. "You have suffered a severe fracture to your L1 and L2 vertebrae. There is significant and dangerous compression on your spinal cord right now. That is exactly why you are experiencing total numbness in your lower extremities. We need to get you into the operating room immediately for a complex spinal decompression and fusion procedure. If we wait any longer, the nerve damage could become completely permanent. You could be paralyzed from the waist down for the rest of your life." My professional financial auditor brain instantly kicked in, overriding the raw human panic that threatened to completely consume my entire mind in that dreadful moment. Severely fractured vertebrae, massive spinal compression, potential permanent paralysis, highly time-sensitive medical intervention. Then do it. I breathed out, fighting through a fresh, crushing wave of blinding pain that rolled down my back. "Please, do the surgery right now. I need official consent," Dr. Thorne replied, his brow furrowing deeply with visible stress. because of the heavy intravenous narcotics we administered to stabilize your extreme pain and the severe blunt force trauma to your head. Hospital protocol strictly requires your designated medical power of attorney to officially sign off on a surgery with this high a risk of mortality and potential paralysis. We checked your emergency medical records when you arrived. Your designated proxy is your mother, Patricia. I closed my eyes, letting out a long, incredibly shaky breath into the plastic mask. Patricia. Just hearing her name spoken aloud in this cold, sterile room sent an entirely different kind of ache through my battered chest. We have been trying to reach her for the last 45 minutes. A nurse spoke up from the other side of my bed, stepping into my line of sight. She slowly held up my personal cell phone directly in front of me in her gloved hand. The glass screen was completely shattered, and the edges of the protective case were smeared with my own dried blood. We called the emergency contact number listed on your file. We have called her cell phone 15 separate times. We also found a contact simply labeled Sister, and one for your brother-in-law, Jamal. We have been calling all of them on a continuous rotation, hoping anyone would just answer and help us. We left urgent voicemails and sent text messages clearly explaining the severe nature of the medical situation. Absolutely no one is picking up the hospital phone today. Call her again. I wheezed, the pain in my back intensifying into a burning throb. She has to pick up. Tell her it is a matter of life and death. The nurse nodded sympathetically. She unlocked my phone using the bypass code I gave her and dialed my mother again, putting it on speaker so I could hear. The line rang 4 times before the cheerful automated prompt echoed in the sterile intensive care unit, sounding completely grotesque against the backdrop of my medical emergency. You have reached Patricia. I am either living my best life or ignoring you. Leave a message. I asked her to try Brianna next. The nurse tapped the screen. You have reached Brianna. Leave a message, and if it is important, just text me. I pleaded with the nurse to call Jamal. He was my brother-in-law and a truly hard-working man. He was a self-made entrepreneur who ran a highly successful chain of boutique fitness centers, tailored specifically for the local Black community. He was always tethered to his phone for business, so I knew he would answer if he saw the call. The line rang and went straight to voicemail. They are screening my calls. I realized the bitter taste of reality flooding my mouth. They see my face on the caller identification and they are actively hitting ignore while I lay here paralyzed. Dr. Thorne checked the clock on the white wall. Natalie, we are running out of time. Every single minute that bone fragment presses against your spinal cord, the nerve tissue dies. I can invoke emergency bypass protocol to operate without consent if you lose consciousness, but while you are awake and aware, I need someone to sign this official paper. Suddenly, my cracked phone buzzed loudly in the nurse's hand. An audio message had just arrived via text. The sender was Patricia. Play it. I whispered, my heart rate monitor picking up speed. The nurse tapped the audio file and my mother's highly annoyed voice filled the quiet hospital room. Natalie, for the love of God, stop spamming my phone! Patricia snapped through the tiny speaker, dripping with pure irritation. There was absolutely no panic in her tone and no concern for the 15 missed calls. Just pure, unadulterated annoyance. I do not have time for whatever dramatic crisis you are trying to pull today. Your sister is having a full-blown panic attack right now. In the background of the audio message, I could clearly hear my 30-year-old sister sobbing loudly and hysterically. The interior decorators completely ruined the living room, Patricia continued, her voice rising in pitch to match the hysterics of her golden child. Brianna specifically ordered emerald green velvet curtains for the massive housewarming party this weekend, and the absolute idiots hung hunter green. It completely clashes with the expensive Moroccan rug. Jamal is trying to calm her down, but she is hyperventilating. We have 75 prominent guests coming, including Jamal's entire extended family, and the house looks like a complete joke. I stared blankly at the ceiling tiles while my spine was crushed and I faced permanent paralysis. My mother was ignoring my desperate calls from a trauma unit because my sister received the wrong shade of green velvet curtains. Whatever attention-seeking stunt you are pulling can wait, Patricia concluded ruthlessly. Do not call me again today. We are dealing with a real emergency here. The audio message ended with a sharp click. A heavy, suffocating silence descended over the intensive care unit. The nurse slowly lowered my phone, her mouth slightly open in absolute shock. Even Dr. Thorne, a man who undoubtedly saw the absolute worst of humanity on a daily basis, looked momentarily stunned by the sheer callousness he had just witnessed. I did not cry. I think when you are pushed past the absolute limit of emotional endurance, the defense mechanism of the human body simply shuts down the tear ducts entirely. I had spent 33 years crying over my mother's blatant favoritism. 33 years of being the designated family scapegoat to my sister, the golden child. The memories hit me in rapid succession, painting a vivid and painful picture of my entire life. I remembered being 18 years old, sitting at the kitchen table, holding an official acceptance letter for a full-ride academic scholarship to my dream university. I was ecstatic and proud of my hard work. But Patricia had snatched the letter right out of my hand and scoffed. She told me that since I got a free ride, she was taking the entire college fund my late father left for me and giving it directly to Brianna. She justified it by saying Brianna wanted to go to a private liberal arts college out of state, and her grades were simply not good enough to earn any scholarships. "You are smart, Natalie," Patricia had said dismissively. "You can figure it out yourself. Your sister needs the financial help more than you do." I remembered being 25, graduating with my master's degree in finance while working 2 grueling jobs just to keep a roof over my head. I invited my entire family to the graduation ceremony. I sat in a massive sea of celebrating graduates, eagerly scanning the bleachers for their familiar faces. They never showed up. Later that night, I saw a post on social media. Patricia and Brianna had gone to a luxury spa resort for the weekend because Brianna had gone through a really tough breakup with a boyfriend of 2 months and needed special mommy and daughter bonding time to heal her broken heart. I was always the complete afterthought, the responsible one who did not require high maintenance and therefore did not require basic love or respect. If I succeeded, I was completely ignored. If I struggled, I was accused of being overly dramatic. Meanwhile, Brianna lived a life of chaotic extravagance. She married Jamal, a hard-working and deeply ambitious man who had poured his life savings into building his fitness empire. Jamal was a genuinely good man, but he was completely blinded by her manufactured charm and endless damsel-in-distress routines. He worked 80-hour weeks to provide for her, completely unaware of the toxic, manipulative reality of the family he had married into. Brianna spent his hard-earned money much faster than he could make it, constantly upgrading her lifestyle to project a fake image of extreme wealth to her followers online. And Patricia enabled every single second of it. To my mother, Brianna was her ultimate proxy, an easy way to live vicariously through high society events and luxury purchases. I, the pragmatic financial auditor who lived well within her means and constantly refused to fund their financial delusions, was simply an inconvenience to their grand lifestyle. Natalie, Dr. Thorne's voice broke through my painful reverie. He looked down at me with a profound, quiet sympathy that my own family had never once shown me. "I am incredibly sorry, but we are entirely out of time right now. The nerve compression in your spine is worsening by the second. If your mother will not answer the phone, I need to know exactly what you want to do next." The excruciating pain in my spine was a jagged, hot knife twisting mercilessly between my vertebrae. The heavy ache in my chest, the dying ember of hope that my family would ever love me, vanished completely. In its place, a cold, calculating clarity took over my entire mind. I am a financial risk auditor. My job is to look at broken corporate systems, identify toxic liabilities, and cut the financial losses to save the enterprise. For 33 years, I had treated my biological family like a bad long-term investment. I was pouring my limited emotional capital into a massive deficit, hoping against logic for a positive return. It was finally time to liquidate the asset. I looked up at the trauma surgeon. The raw human panic that had gripped me just moments earlier was entirely gone. Dr. Thorne, I said, my voice no longer shaking. It was steady, cold, and absolute. I am fully conscious, and I am legally overriding my mother as my medical power of attorney. Bring me the consent forms right now. I will sign them myself. The doctor hesitated for a fraction of a second, his eyes scanning my glowing vital monitors to ensure I was stable enough to make this call. Given the heavy trauma protocol and the high doses of intravenous pain medication we administered, the hospital administration strongly prefers the designated proxy to sign the paperwork. My proxy is currently having a temper tantrum over velvet window treatments while my spinal cord dies. I interrupted, my tone slicing through the sterile air of the intensive care unit like a scalpel. I understand the severe risks of this surgery. I understand the mortality rate. I understand the permanent paralysis risk. If you wait for Patricia to care about my life, I will be in a wheelchair forever. Give me the pen. Dr. Thorne studied my face for a long moment. He saw the unwavering determination burning brightly in my eyes. He nodded sharply, turning to the nurse. Print the self-consent waiver immediately and get the operating room prepped for emergency spinal decompression. The nurse scrambled to the mobile workstation and quickly returned with a digital tablet and a stylus. She held it steady over my chest. Every tiny movement I made to lift my right arm sent shockwaves of blinding agony down my neck and shoulders. But I fought through the trauma. I gripped the plastic stylus with trembling fingers. I stared at the dense legal medical jargon on the glowing screen. Acknowledgement of risk of death. Acknowledgement of risk of paralysis. I signed my name with a forceful, jagged scrawl. I handed the stylus back. We are moving you to the operating room in exactly 5 minutes, Dr. Thorne announced, springing into rapid action. The surgical team is scrubbing in now. Nurse, I said, my voice dropping to a razor-sharp whisper. Give me my phone. She hesitated, looking at the cracked device resting on the metal tray table. You are about to go under heavy general anesthesia, Natalie. You need to rest and stay calm. I have exactly 5 minutes, I replied, locking eyes with her. Give me the phone. She carefully handed me the shattered device. I winced as the movement pulled at my fractured back, but I ignored the pain. I did not dial Patricia. I did not dial Brianna. I navigated straight to my favorites list and dialed my attorney. David picked up on the second ring. David was a 45-year-old corporate litigator who handled my personal estate and my financial assets. He was brilliant, ruthless, precise, and fiercely protective of his clients. He was the kind of lawyer who dismantled opposing counsel with a terrifying calm. Natalie, he answered, his voice crisp and professional. It is Tuesday morning. You usually do not call me during business hours unless the Internal Revenue Service is breathing down a corporate client's neck. What is wrong today? David. I gasped out, my breath hitching as a sudden violent spasm of pain rocked my entire body. I have been in a severe multi-car crash. I am currently in the intensive care unit at Memorial Hospital. I have a crushed spine and I am being wheeled into emergency surgery in exactly 3 minutes. The casual, professional tone vanished from his voice, instantly replaced by a sharp, urgent focus. I am on my way to the hospital right now. What do you need me to do? I need 2 things, I told him, forcing the words out through clenched teeth. First, I need you to draft an immediate and permanent revocation of Patricia's medical power of attorney. I am legally transferring all medical and legal proxy rights directly to you effective this exact second. Send the digital documents to the hospital administration desk immediately so she cannot interfere. Consider it done, David said, the sound of his car keys jingling loudly in the background. I will have my paralegal email the expedited forms to the chief of medicine before I even pull out of my driveway. What is the second thing? I stared up at the stark white ceiling tiles of the hospital room. The lights illuminated everything with unforgiving clarity. I thought about my younger sister crying over her emerald green curtains in a house she did not even own. I thought about the housewarming party she was throwing to show off her new home to Jamal's extended family. I thought about my mother enabling this toxic delusion while letting me bleed out in a trauma ward. The anger inside me crystallized into something incredibly powerful and incredibly dangerous. Bring the property files for the house on Maplewood Drive, I instructed David, my voice dropping an octave. Bring the original deed, the property tax records, and the lease agreements. And David draft a strict 30-day eviction notice. David did not miss a beat. His sharp legal mind caught up immediately. They pushed you way too far. They left me to die over a velvet curtain, I finally said. It is time to collect their debts. 48 hours later, I woke up to the steady hum of machines and the ache of a healing incision. The anesthesia had flushed out, leaving my mind sharp despite the trauma my body had endured. Dr. Thorne had performed a miracle in the operating room. The spinal decompression was successful, and the bone fragments had been removed before they could sever my nerves. I was encased from my chest to my hips in a plastic spinal brace that made me feel like I was trapped inside a turtle shell. But when I concentrated hard enough, I could wiggle my toes. That movement was a victory. I was not paralyzed. I was going to walk. I spent the first day and a half drifting in and out of sleep. During my brief windows of clarity David had visited. True to his word, my lawyer had executed the power of attorney transfer with efficiency. The administration had the signed documents on file before the first scalpel touched my skin. David had also brought the folder containing the Maplewood property deed and the eviction notice. He told me he would wait in the cafeteria downstairs working on his laptop until I gave him the signal. The trap was fully set. I just needed the mice to walk into the room. I did not have to wait much longer. On the afternoon of the second day, the door to my room swung open. The lights caught the blowout of my mother Patricia as she marched into the environment. Right behind her, trailing like a shadow in a tracksuit, was my sister Brianna. Neither of them rushed to my bedside. Neither of them dropped their bags in relief at seeing me alive. In fact, they did not even look at me first. Instead, they were both casually sipping from massive plastic iced coffee cups, condensation dripping down the sides and pooling on the spotless floor. I cannot believe they charged $25 for daily parking in that structure, Patricia complained, her voice echoing off the equipment. And the valet attendant was rude when I asked him to keep the car up front. Do they not realize people visiting this place are already under enough stress without being gouged at the gate? Brianna sighed, taking a slurp from her plastic straw. I know, Mom. And we had to walk past the disease wing just to find this elevator. The smell of bleach and sickness in the hallway is making me nauseous. I have a sensitive stomach right now. I probably need to sit down before I faint from the fumes. I lay still in my spinal brace, watching them with the gaze of an auditor reviewing a tax return. I had just survived a speed collision with a semi-truck. I had a metal plate screwed into my lower spine. I had narrowly escaped spending the rest of my life in a wheelchair. Yet my mother and sister strolled into a trauma unit, treating my experience like an annoying detour on their itinerary. Patricia finally turned her attention toward my bed. She stopped a few feet away, keeping a safe distance from the monitors and lines connected to my arms. She looked me up and down with an eye taking in the skin on my face, the dark circles under my eyes, and the shell encasing my torso. "Well, you look terrible, Natalie," Patricia stated, taking another sip of her iced coffee. "But the nurse said the surgery was fine and you are already recovering. I told you there was no need to cause such panic with all those phone calls the other day. You had the staff calling my cell phone like the building was on fire. I had to turn my phone off just to get some peace and quiet." I stared at her, letting the audacity of her words hang in the air. "You turned your phone off?" I asked, my voice quiet, but laced with an edge. "The hospital told you I was going into emergency spinal surgery, and your response was to turn your phone off." Brianna rolled her eyes and leaned against the chair, crossing her arms. "Oh, please, Natalie, do not start playing the victim card right now. We came all the way down here to check on you, did we not? You have no idea how stressful this week has been for me. The housewarming party is in 3 days. Half the guest list is Jamal's family, and my event planner is threatening to walk out because the floral arrangements are delayed. I have been running around the city since dawn trying to fix disasters." You are right, I replied, keeping my tone calm. Your floral arrangements are a much bigger disaster than a crushed spine. I apologize for bleeding on the highway and interrupting your schedule. Patricia waved her hand, ignoring the sarcasm in my voice. You are always so dramatic, Natalie. You survived the crash. The doctors fixed your back. You are resting comfortably in a room that must cost a fortune, by the way. I really hope your health insurance is covering all this because I am not paying the deductible. We are here now so you can stop holding a grudge about a few missed calls. We have much more pressing matters to discuss today anyway. A sharp laugh escaped my throat, ending in a cough as my ribs protested the movement. Pressing matters. My mother stood in a hospital looking at her injured daughter, and the only pressing matter on her mind was whatever selfish agenda brought her here. The lack of empathy was no longer painful, it was liberating. The last thread of daughterly guilt I held on to snapped completely, leaving nothing but cold resolve. I adjusted my head slightly on the pillow, locking eyes with Patricia. All right then, I said calmly. Let us discuss these pressing matters. What could possibly be so very urgently important for you two today? Brianna pushed off the wall and stepped closer to the edge of my bed. She suddenly adopted that sickly sweet tone she always used right before asking for a massive favor. It was a practiced performance honed over decades of getting what she wanted. Her lower lip jutted out in a perfectly calculated pout, and she widened her eyes to project an image of absolute innocence. So here's the thing, Natalie. Brianna began swirling the ice in her plastic cup, causing a clinking sound. The housewarming party this coming weekend is turning into a massive logistical nightmare. Jamal invited literally everyone he knows. His parents, his siblings, his cousins from out of state, and all the heavy hitters from the local business community. He wants to show off our new lifestyle and prove that all his hard work finally paid off. I had to hire a premium event coordinator to manage the catering, the live jazz band, and the custom floral installations. I wanted everything to be absolutely flawless. And let me guess. I interjected, my voice flat and completely unyielding. You blew past your strict budget, and now the premium event coordinator wants to be paid before the event. Brianna let out a dramatic, heavy sigh, tossing her highlighted hair over her shoulder. She is being completely unreasonable right now. She is demanding her final payment of exactly $15,000 by 5 o'clock today, or she is pulling her entire team. If she walks out, the caterers and the decorators go with her. The party will be a total, unmitigated disaster. I will be humiliated in front of Jamal's entire extended family and all his wealthy investors. I cannot let that happen, Natalie. I just cannot survive that kind of public embarrassment. Then pay her, I replied, staring blankly at my younger sister. You and Jamal live in a massive, luxurious house. He owns a highly successful chain of boutique fitness centers that generate incredible revenue. Write the woman a check and solve your own problem. Patricia chimed in quickly, stepping up right beside her golden child to form a united front. It is not that simple, Natalie. You know exactly how Jamal is with his business capital. He tied up their cash in new treadmills and weightlifting equipment. He is rapidly expanding the franchise and building a lasting legacy for his community. He explicitly told Brianna they had to keep the housewarming budget incredibly strict because of the recent business investments. If she asks him for another $15,000 right now, he will hit the roof. He simply does not understand how much it truly costs to host a proper high society event. He understands the actual value of $1, I corrected my mother sharply. Jamal works 80 brutal hours a week to build his fitness empire from the ground up. He sets a financial budget because he runs a real sustainable business. If you agreed to a strict budget, Brianna, you should have stuck to it. Brianna stomped her expensive sneaker on the hospital floor like a spoiled toddler denied a shiny new toy. I could not stick to the basic budget, Natalie. The basic catering package was completely embarrassing. I secretly upgraded to the premium seafood station and the imported champagne tower because we absolutely need to impress these people. Jamal's family is expecting a lavish luxury experience. I am his beautiful wife. I represent his personal brand. I need you to wire $15,000 to my checking account right now so I can pay the coordinator before the deadline. You make great money as an auditor and sit in an office all day. Consider it your early housewarming gift to us. I lay there firmly encased in my hard plastic spinal brace, listening to the steady, unfeeling beeping of my heart monitor. My professional auditor brain was working overtime, analyzing the sheer audacity of this demand. I had just survived a horrific high-speed car crash. My spine was literally held together by medical-grade titanium screws. I was facing long, brutal months of painful physical therapy just to walk normally again. And my sister marched into my intensive care unit to demand a massive cash transfer for a champagne tower. The astronomical level of entitlement was completely breathtaking. "No," I said simply. Brianna blinked rapidly, her brain clearly struggling to process the direct rejection. "What do you mean no? I just explained the whole dire situation to you. I am in a massive crisis here." "I mean absolutely not," I stated, my voice echoing coldly off the sterile walls of the medical room. "I am not wiring you a single cent. I am not funding your ridiculous imported champagne tower. I am not bailing you out of a financial mess you created behind your husband's back. You spent money you do not have to impress people who do not care. That is a terrible financial liability, and I do not finance bad toxic investments." "Natalie, do not be so incredibly selfish." Patricia snapped, her face flushing with immediate intense anger. "You are sitting on a massive pile of savings. You do not even have a husband or any children to spend it on. Your own sister is in desperate, dire need of your help. She is building a beautiful life with a highly successful man, and you are trying to sabotage her out of pure jealousy." "Jealousy," I repeated, letting out a harsh, dry laugh that deeply rattled my bruised ribcage. "You think I am jealous of a woman who has to constantly lie to her own hard-working husband about her secret spending habits? You think I am jealous of someone who begs her recently hospitalized sister for party funds? You ignored my urgent medical calls while I faced paralysis because you stressed over velvet curtains. You left me to die completely alone. And now you have the absolute nerve to walk in here and demand $15,000. Patricia slammed her plastic iced coffee cup down on the rolling hospital tray table with such immense force that the brown liquid violently splashed over the edges. Her face twisted into a mask of pure, unfiltered narcissistic rage. The mask she usually reserved for closed doors was now slipping completely in the middle of a hospital trauma unit. "How dare you speak to us that way?" Patricia hissed, her voice trembling with manufactured indignation. "You have always possessed this sick, twisted victim mentality, Natalie. We did not leave you to die. You are blowing a simple miscommunication entirely out of proportion just to make your sister feel bad on her special week. I simply told the nurse we had an urgent situation at the house. We knew you were in a hospital surrounded by top-tier medical professionals. You were perfectly safe." "Safe," I echoed very flatly. "I required emergency spinal surgery to prevent permanent paralysis. That is not a simple miscommunication. That is medical neglect." "You always exaggerate everything," Patricia countered, waving her hand dismissively in the air. "This is exactly why you are 33 years old and completely alone. You push everyone away with your bitter, selfish attitude. You have always been this way. Even when you were 18 years old, you were completely obsessed with yourself. You took that full-ride scholarship and hoarded your own paycheck from your part-time job instead of helping this family. You knew Brianna needed those funds for her liberal arts degree. You knew she struggled with her academic testing. But did you care about her future? No. You only cared about padding your own bank account." I stared at my mother, completely mesmerized by her breathtaking ability to rewrite documented history. "I earned that academic scholarship through years of sleepless nights and relentless studying," I stated clearly. "My late father left that college fund for my education. You stole it to pay for Brianna to party at an out-of-state private college for 4 years. And now you expect me to drain my hard-earned financial assets to fund a seafood station." Brianna stepped out from behind our mother, clutching her designer handbag tightly to her chest. She forced fresh tears into her eyes, pulling the ultimate manipulation tactic she had kept hidden in her back pocket. "You do not understand, Natalie. Brianna sobbed, her voice trembling with practiced fragility. It is not just about the housewarming party anymore. It is about the future of our family. I am pregnant. I am carrying Jamal's first child. The revelation hung heavily in the sterile hospital air. My eyes darted to Brianna's perfectly flat stomach and then back up to her tear-streaked face. Patricia immediately wrapped her arms around Brianna, glaring at me with triumphant defiance. That is right, Natalie. Your younger sister is bringing my very first grandchild into this world. She is building a beautiful legacy with a prominent, successful black man who adores her. Jamal's family is coming to this party to celebrate their new home and their growing family. Do you have any idea how much stress Brianna is under right now? The doctor explicitly told her she needs to avoid all emotional distress for the safety of the baby. And here you are actively endangering your unborn niece or nephew over a measly $15,000. You are weaponizing a pregnancy to extort money from an intensive care patient. I observed, my voice dangerously low. Does Jamal know you are here demanding cash to cover up your reckless spending? Does he know you are using his unborn child as leverage to fix your broken party budget? Do not you dare bring Jamal into this. Brianna snapped her fragile victim persona, dropping for a fraction of a second to reveal the vicious panic underneath. Jamal is busy running his fitness empire. He provides everything for me. He just expects a certain standard of luxury for his family events. If you ruin this for me, Natalie, I will never forgive you. I will make sure you never even meet this baby. Patricia tightened her grip on Brianna, nodding vigorously. Your sister is offering you an incredible opportunity to be part of this child's life, Natalie. You should be down on your knees thanking her for including you in her joy. You sit in your corporate office auditing financial risks all day while your life passes you by. You have no legacy. You have no real family of your own. This $15,000 is a tiny price to pay to stay connected to us. If you refuse to support your pregnant sister in her hour of need, you are officially dead to this family. The gaslighting was absolutely suffocating. They were cornering me in a hospital bed, using a mixture of profound guilt, toxic shame, and outright emotional blackmail to crack my defenses. In the past, this exact coordinated attack strategy would have broken me completely. I would have quietly transferred the funds just to stop the screaming. I would have apologized for being a burden. I would have handed over my hard-earned money to buy a few fleeting moments of fake maternal affection. But the woman lying in this rigid spinal brace was not the same broken girl they had cruelly bullied for 3 long decades. The sharp pain radiating through my crushed vertebrae was a constant physical reminder of exactly where their true priorities lay. They had firmly drawn their line in the sand when they ignored my emergency phone calls. I coldly looked at Patricia and Brianna. I examined their expensive clothes, their flawless hair, their iced coffees, and their absolute lack of basic human empathy. I mentally calculated the exact depth of their shared delusion. They genuinely believed they held all the supreme power in this tiny room. They genuinely believed my pathetic desperation for their fake love would force my hand to open my checkbook. They were just completely mistaken. I let the silence stretch, allowing their smug expressions to settle. They were waiting for me to break. They expected the obedient daughter who always bought their fake affection. Instead, I turned my head slightly toward the thick privacy curtain drawn across the far corner of my hospital room. My ribs ached with the effort, but the satisfaction blooming in my chest numbed the physical pain. "You can come out now, David," I said, my voice completely steady. The heavy fabric was pulled back with a sharp, decisive motion. David stepped into the harsh fluorescent light, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored charcoal suit. He had been standing there in absolute silence, listening to every toxic word, every manipulative threat, and every extortion attempt my mother and sister had just weaponized against me. Patricia and Brianna spun around, startled by the sudden appearance of a stranger. Patricia immediately tried to smooth her features back into a mask of polite indignation, pulling her designer cardigan tight. "Excuse me," Patricia demanded, her voice laced with arrogant authority. Who are you and why are you hiding in my daughter's private medical room? This is a highly sensitive family discussion. You need to leave right now before I call hospital security and have you forcibly removed. David did not even blink. He walked methodically toward the foot of my bed, his leather shoes clicking sharply. He opened his sleek black briefcase and pulled out a stack of legal documents printed on heavy watermarked paper. My name is David, he stated, his voice projecting the terrifying calm of a corporate litigator. I am the primary legal counsel and asset manager for Natalie. I also currently hold her absolute medical power of attorney, effective as of yesterday morning when she legally revoked your proxy rights. Patricia, I assure you, hospital security is fully aware of my presence. Patricia physically recoiled, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. You revoked my medical proxy, she stammered, looking from David to me. You cannot do that. I am your mother. You have no right to strip me of my parental authority. You forfeited that privilege the moment you ignored 15 emergency calls to scream about velvet window treatments, I replied coldly. But David is not just here to manage my medical directives, he is here to handle a much more pressing financial liability. David stepped forward and extended his arm, handing a stapled packet of documents directly to my mother. Patricia took the papers reflexively, her manicured hands trembling slightly as she looked down at the bold black text printed across the top page. Brianna leaned over her shoulder, her eyes scanning the legal jargon. What is this? Brianna asked, her voice dropping its fragile victim tone and taking on a sharp edge of panic. That, David explained with surgical precision, is a formal 30-day eviction notice. It mandates the immediate vacation of the property located on Maplewood Drive. You have exactly 1 month to remove all of your personal belongings and vacate the premises entirely. If you fail to comply, the local sheriff will be dispatched to forcibly remove you, and all items remaining in the house will be considered legally abandoned. Patricia let out a shrill, barking laugh of pure disbelief. She threw the papers onto the rolling tray table. This is completely absurd. You cannot evict me from my own home. My late husband left that house to me. We have lived there for decades. You have absolutely no legal standing here. You are just trying to scare us with fake legal threats because you are angry about a few missed calls. I shifted my gaze to meet my mother's eyes, relishing the absolute power shift in the room. Dad died with a mountain of hidden debt, I said softly, dropping the bombshell I had kept secret for 5 years. He took out massive second mortgages to fund your lavish lifestyle and Brianna's out-of-state tuition. The bank was foreclosing on the Maplewood property 5 years ago. You were 60 days away from being thrown out onto the street with absolutely nothing to your name. The color drained entirely from Patricia's face. She grabbed the edge of the bed rail to steady herself. That is impossible, she whispered, her voice cracking. The bank modified the loan, the lawyer said. A private investor stepped in and cleared the debts. I am the private investor, I stated, watching the reality crash over them like an icy wave. I bought the house directly from the bank holding company. I paid off the liens using the money I made from my first 2 years of corporate auditing. I put the property in a blind trust managed by David to protect you from bankruptcy. For 5 years, you and Brianna have been living there entirely rent-free. I have been quietly paying the property taxes, the home insurance, and the utility bills using my own credit cards, so you could maintain your precious high society facade. Brianna gasped, taking a step backward as if she had been physically struck. You own the house, she shrieked, her voice cracking with raw hysteria. You have owned the house this whole time, and you never told us. You let us believe the bank fixed it. I let you live there out of a misplaced sense of filial obligation. I continued, my voice rising with unyielding authority. The only unofficial condition of that generous arrangement was that Patricia would act as a responsible guardian if I ever experienced a medical emergency. You spectacularly failed that basic human requirement. The free ride is officially over. The lease agreement you never knew you had is formally terminated. You cannot do this to me, Patricia screamed, losing all sense of decorum. I am your own mother. You are recovering in a hospital bed, and you are trying to make us homeless. Where are we supposed to go? What on earth are we supposed to do? I suggest you start packing your designer bags, I said, my voice entirely devoid of any remaining sympathy. Or perhaps you can ask Jamal to tap into his precious business expansion funds to rent you a luxury apartment downtown. Now get out of my hospital room before David calls the security guards to escort you both out of this building. Patricia stared at me with pure hatred, her chest heaving as she struggled to find a comeback that could pierce my armor. She found none. Grabbing her expensive purse, she spun on her heel and stormed toward the door. Brianna followed close behind, her face flushed with humiliation and sudden terror at the prospect of losing her lavish lifestyle. The heavy wooden door slammed shut behind them, vibrating the walls of the intensive care unit. David let out a long exhale and adjusted his tie. Well, he remarked calmly, placing the remaining documents back into his briefcase. That went exactly as predicted. I will have the formal eviction papers served by the county sheriff this afternoon, just to ensure there is a rock-solid paper trail. They will not be able to claim ignorance. Thank you, David, I replied, letting my head sink back into the thin hospital pillow. The adrenaline that had fueled my confrontation was rapidly fading, leaving me utterly exhausted and painfully aware of the titanium screws in my spine. I closed my eyes and let the pain medication pull me into a deep, dreamless sleep. I should have known Patricia and Brianna would not just pack boxes and walk away quietly, corner a narcissist and they do not surrender. They rewrite the narrative and play the ultimate victim. 24 hours later, my phone began to vibrate relentlessly on my bedside table. I ignored it at first, assuming it was just automated updates from my insurance provider. But the buzzing grew frantic, continuous, and aggressive. I reached over carefully, mindful of my spinal brace, and unlocked the screen. I had hundreds of new notifications, missed calls from unknown numbers, direct messages on every social media platform, mentions and tags flooding my screen at an alarming rate. I opened the first message from a stranger. It read simply, "You are an absolute monster. How can you sleep at night?" Frowning, I tapped on a tag that led me to a viral video on social media. The screen loaded to show Brianna sitting on the edge of the plush velvet sofa in the Maplewood house. She was deliberately wearing an oversized beige sweater that made her look small and fragile. She was completely makeup-free, her hair pulled into a messy bun. She was crying softly, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue while cradling her perfectly flat stomach. Behind her, sitting in the background like a tragic extra in a stage play, was Patricia. My mother was holding a framed photograph of my late father, looking down at it with profound manufactured sorrow. "Hi everyone," Brianna whispered into the camera, her voice trembling with practiced vulnerability. "I never thought I would have to make a video like this. I am so embarrassed and completely heartbroken. But my family is in desperate need of help. Yesterday, while I was planning a small housewarming gathering to celebrate my first pregnancy, my older sister handed my elderly grieving mother and me an eviction notice. I watched in cold fascination as Brianna spun a masterclass in digital manipulation. She completely omitted the multi-car crash. She completely omitted my crushed spine and the emergency surgery they had actively ignored. Instead, she painted me as a greedy, calculating corporate auditor who had secretly purchased our childhood home years ago just to hold it over their heads. She claimed I was deeply jealous of her happy marriage to Jamal and enraged by the news of her pregnancy. She is a wealthy corporate executive who sits in a high-rise office. Brianna sobbed directly into the camera lens. She has millions in the bank, but she is throwing her own pregnant sister and our senior mother onto the street out of pure spite. We have 30 days to pack our entire lives into boxes. Jamal tied up all his cash opening a new fitness center for the community, so we are completely blindsided and financially trapped. Please, if you can spare anything we need to secure housing before the baby arrives. Below the video was a bold link to a crowdfunding campaign. The title read, "Cruel Sister Evicts Pregnant Sibling and Elderly Mother." The fundraising goal was set at an astronomical $100,000. They claimed the funds would be used for legal defense fees, emergency relocation, and medical care for Brianna's high-risk pregnancy. I refreshed the page. The video already had 2 million views. The crowdfunding campaign had generated over $40,000 in just 12 hours. Strangers were pouring their hard-earned money into Brianna's bank account, blinded by her crocodile tears. Worse, the internet mob had been fully unleashed. Digital vigilantes had easily located my professional profiles. The comment section under the video was an absolute bloodbath of public outrage. People were calling me a sociopath, a corporate leech, and a jealous barren spinster. They tagged my employer, demanding that the healthcare conglomerate fire me immediately for moral turpitude. Strangers were sharing the address of my corporate office and posting threatening messages about waiting for me in the parking garage. They had weaponized the internet to destroy my career and my reputation. It was a calculated scorched earth tactic designed to force me into dropping the eviction out of sheer public shame. They genuinely thought the intense pressure of a viral hate campaign would make me crumble. My phone buzzed again. This time it was David. "Are you seeing this?" he asked, his voice tight with professional concern. "My paralegal just sent me the links. This is severe defamation, Natalie. The crowdfunding campaign alone constitutes massive wire fraud. We can issue a cease and desist immediately and contact the platform to freeze the donations." "No," I said, my auditor brain engaging with absolute icy precision. "Do not issue a cease and desist yet. Let them keep talking. Let them keep collecting the money." David paused, clearly confused by my strategy. "Natalie, they are destroying your public image. They are contacting your corporate employer. You cannot just let this smear campaign continue unchecked." "I am not letting it continue unchecked," I explained, staring at the mounting donation total on the fraudulent campaign page. "I am letting them dig a hole so deep they will never legally climb out of it. Brianna is collecting thousands of dollars across state lines under the explicit pretense of a high-risk pregnancy. If that pregnancy is fake, she is committing federal wire fraud on a massive scale." "Are you suggesting she is lying about the baby?" David asked, the implication dawning on him. "I am a risk auditor, David. I never believe the initial report without checking the underlying receipts. And right now I have plenty of time sitting in this hospital bed to do a little digital digging. Give me 24 hours to audit my sister." I ended the call with David and reached for my laptop resting on the table beside my bed. My fingers flew across the keyboard, ignoring the ache radiating from my shoulders. The moment I logged into my email, a barrage of high-priority messages flooded my inbox. The subject lines were a symphony of corporate panic: urgent public relations concern, viral video inquiry, employee conduct review. The internet mob had done its job with terrifying efficiency. My screen flashed with an incoming video call request from Harrison, the Senior Vice President of Risk Management, and Brenda, the Director of Human Resources. I propped myself up against the stiff pillows, making sure my rigid spinal brace was clearly visible within the camera frame. I clicked accept. Harrison appeared on the screen looking stressed while Brenda sat beside him with her hands folded. Harrison began skipping pleasantries. "I see you are still in the hospital. We received your medical leave request yesterday, but we need to discuss a highly sensitive matter that just crossed our desks. The Public Relations Department has been fielding hundreds of angry calls all morning." Brenda leaned forward. "A video posted by your sister has gone viral. She claims you are evicting her during a high-risk pregnancy and throwing your elderly mother onto the street. People are linking your name to our conglomerate. They are accusing us of employing a monster. This is a severe violation of our morality clause. We are a healthcare company. We cannot have a senior auditor trending online for abusing a pregnant woman." I looked at my superiors, feeling a cold wave of disappointment. "I am lying in a trauma unit recovering from emergency spinal fusion surgery," I stated, my voice perfectly level. "I narrowly survived a catastrophic car accident. My mother and sister ignored my hospital calls while I was facing permanent paralysis. They currently live rent-free in a house I own, and I am evicting them because they abandoned me to die." The video is a retaliatory smear campaign. Harrison rubbed his temples, looking uncomfortable. I sympathize with your medical situation, Natalie. Truly, I do. But the internet does not care about nuance or your side of the story. They only care about the optics of a wealthy auditor evicting a pregnant woman. The board of directors is panicking. We need this public relations nightmare to disappear completely by the end of the week. If this continues to escalate, we will have no choice but to place you on unpaid administrative leave. You want me to surrender to online extortion to protect the company brand? I asked, my tone dropping to a dangerous whisper. We want the viral outrage to stop. Brenda clarified, her voice lacking any real warmth. We need you to handle your family drama quietly. Make it go away, Natalie. That is a direct order. The video call ended abruptly, leaving me staring at my own reflection on the dark screen. They wanted me to roll over and surrender. They wanted me to drop the eviction and let Patricia and Brianna win just to appease a misinformed digital mob. But surrendering was not in my vocabulary anymore. I am a financial risk auditor. I do not run from audits. I initiate them. I opened an encrypted browser window and began my investigation. If Brianna wanted to play a game of extortion, I was going to show her what a professional digital forensic audit looked like. I started with the crowdfunding campaign itself. I pulled up the page and examined the metadata. The campaign was registered under Brianna's name, but the payout routing number was linked to a secondary banking platform used to funnel cash into untraceable offshore accounts. Next, I moved to her public social media footprint. Brianna was a narcissist who lived her entire life online, which meant she left a massive digital trail everywhere she went. She claimed in her crying video that she was suffering from a high-risk pregnancy requiring expensive medical care. I opened her profile and scrolled back through the last 2 months of posts. I cross-referenced her geographical location tags with her background photos. 3 weeks ago, she posted a selfie holding a mimosa at a brunch. 2 weeks ago, she posted a video riding a high-speed roller coaster at a theme park. Last week, she tagged herself at a luxury seafood restaurant eating raw oysters. None of those activities aligned with a woman managing a high-risk pregnancy. I needed concrete financial proof to completely destroy her narrative. I logged into a secure background verification database used for corporate risk assessments. I ran a search on the medical clinic Brianna named in a recent post about her supposed prenatal care. The search results loaded instantly. The clinic was not an obstetrics and gynecology practice. It was an exclusive medical spa specializing in cosmetic injections, dermal fillers, and laser fat removal. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I dug deeper into her public payment applications. Brianna was reckless enough to leave her transaction history set to public on a popular mobile payment application. I scrolled through her recent payments and found a recurring transfer to an account labeled Premium Event Design. She was using the funds pouring into the charitable campaign to pay off the exorbitant balance for her upcoming housewarming party. She was laundering donations meant for a fake medical crisis directly into custom floral arrangements. The sheer audacity of her scheme was breathtaking. She weaponized the sympathy of strangers to fund her luxury lifestyle while simultaneously trying to destroy my career. I systematically took high-resolution screenshots of every single piece of evidence. I compiled the location tags, the raw seafood dinners, the roller coaster videos, the medical spa registration, and the public payment transfers into a highly detailed encrypted dossier. I was building a financial guillotine. The viral hate campaign outside my hospital room was raging like a wildfire, but I sat in my spinal brace, perfectly calm. Let the internet mob scream. Let my corporate bosses panic over the temporary optics. I had successfully traced the money, and I had gathered enough undeniable proof to send my sister to federal prison for wire fraud. I saved the dossier to a secure cloud drive and sent a direct link to David. My family thought they had successfully backed me into a corner with their pathetic online theatrics. They were about to learn that you never pick a financial fight with a woman who dissects complex fraud for a living. I was ready. I hit send on the encrypted email to David and leaned back against the stiff hospital pillows. My phone immediately began vibrating again. I expected another angry message from a stranger or another corporate reprimand from human resources. But the name flashing across the cracked screen was Jamal. I took a deep breath, letting the sterile air fill my lungs, and swiped to answer Natalie. What on earth is going through your mind right now? Jamal demanded, his voice tight with suppressed rage. It was a deep, booming voice that usually commanded respect on the gym floor, but right now it was vibrating with pure anger. "Hello, Jamal," I replied, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. "It is nice to finally hear from you. I assume you received the formal legal documents." "Do not play games with me," Jamal snapped. "Yes, I saw the 30-day eviction notice. I also just spent the last hour doing damage control because my phone is blowing up with people asking why my wife is crying on the internet about being thrown onto the street. I have spent years building a solid, pristine reputation in this city. Natalie, I built my fitness centers from the ground up to serve our community. I sponsor youth programs. I mentor local kids. My brand is built on integrity and family values, and now my own sister-in-law is dragging my family name through the mud, making us look like we are begging for charity online." I listened to his tirade, feeling a brief flicker of genuine sympathy for him. Jamal was a proud, self-made black man who had fought tooth and nail for every ounce of his success. He was fiercely protective of his community and his business. Brianna knew exactly what she was doing when she made that video. She knew it would force Jamal to step in and defend his family honor. "I am not the one who posted a fraudulent video begging for cash on the internet," Jamal, I pointed out calmly. "Your wife did that completely on her own. I simply terminated a lease agreement on a property that I rightfully own, a property where you both have been living rent-free for 5 years. We did not know you owned the house," Jamal shot back defensively. "Brianna told me the bank held the mortgage and her mother was covering the payments with your late father life insurance. We were going to buy our own place next year after the gym expansion stabilized. But throwing us out right now, with 30 days' notice while Brianna is pregnant, that is just cruel. Natalie, I know you two have your issues, and I know you think she is spoiled, but putting an expectant mother on the street is completely out of line. You need to drop this eviction right now and call off your lawyers." I closed my eyes for a moment, processing the sheer volume of lies Brianna had fed her own husband. I asked, my voice dropping to a serious professional register. "What exactly did Brianna tell you about my car accident?" "She said you got into a fender bender and were staying overnight for observation." Jamal answered, his tone shifting slightly, indicating a trace of confusion. "She said you were fine, but you were being demanding and blowing up her phone while she was trying to finalize the catering for the housewarming party." I was crushed between a concrete median and a commercial semi-truck at 70 miles per hour. "Jamal," I stated bluntly, letting the raw truth hit him. "I suffered severe spinal compression. I was lying in a trauma unit facing permanent paralysis from the waist down. The hospital called Patricia and Brianna 15 times to get emergency medical consent for a high-risk spinal fusion surgery. They ignored every single call because Brianna was having a meltdown over the color of the velvet curtains in the living room." There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. I could practically hear the gears turning in Jamal's head as he tried to reconcile the narrative his wife had given him with the brutal reality of my medical situation. "That cannot be true," Jamal finally said, but his voice lacked its previous absolute conviction. Brianna never do something like that. She told me the hospital just needed insurance information. I have the voicemails, Jamal," I replied. "I have the medical records. I have the hospital call logs. She left me to die over a party decoration. That is why the lease is terminated. But since we are on the subject of the party and your financial situation, let me ask you a professional question as a financial risk auditor. What does my financial situation have to do with any of this?" Jamal asked, his defensive walls instantly snapping back into place. You just told me your business capital is completely tied up in the new gym expansion, I said methodically, laying out the pieces of the puzzle for him to examine. You said you are running a tight budget. Yet Brianna came to my hospital room yesterday demanding I wire her $15,000 to pay the premium event coordinator for your lavish housewarming party. She mentioned an imported champagne tower and a custom seafood station. Does that sound like a tight budget to you? Jamal exhaled sharply. That is impossible. I gave her a strict $5,000 budget for the entire event. We agreed on local catering and a modest setup. Did you actually look at the final invoices? I pressed, pushing the seed of doubt deeper into his mind. Or did you just trust her when she said she was handling it? You are a brilliant businessman, Jamal. You track every single dollar that flows through your fitness centers. But do you track the money flowing out of your own accounts? Brianna is my wife, Jamal growled before disconnecting the call. I stared at the black screen of my phone as the line went dead. Brianna is my wife. Those words hung in the sterile air of my hospital room, echoing with a desperate kind of loyalty. Jamal was fiercely protective, but he was also a man who built his life on hard facts and measurable results. His analytical brain would not ignore the massive financial discrepancies I had just laid out. He was going to check those invoices. He was going to look at his banking statements. I could not wait for Jamal to figure out the truth on his own. I had an active fraud campaign to dismantle right now. I opened my laptop and saw an incoming encrypted video call from David. I answered immediately. He was sitting in his downtown office, his face illuminated by the glow of multiple computer monitors. I received the dossier you compiled. David said, his voice vibrating with professional awe. Natalie, this is a masterpiece of digital forensics. You mapped her entire financial footprint in under 2 hours while strapped to a hospital bed. The geolocation data matching her luxury seafood dinners to the exact dates she claimed to be bedridden with pregnancy complications is incredibly damning. But the crowning achievement is the clinic registration. I adjusted my spinal brace, wincing at the pressure. I ran a cross-reference on the medical facility she listed on the crowdfunding page. I explained. She tried to blur the logo in her video, but I enhanced the reflection in the window behind her. It is a high-end medical spa that exclusively performs cosmetic enhancements and laser treatments. They do not have a single obstetrician on staff. She is not paying for high-risk prenatal care. She is funneling the charitable donations to pay for lip fillers and event catering. It is textbook wire fraud, David confirmed, pulling up a legal document on his screen. Soliciting funds across multiple states immediately elevates this to a federal offense. I have already drafted a comprehensive demand letter to the legal department of the crowdfunding platform. I am attaching your entire dossier as Exhibit A. Do it. I commanded, my voice hard and resolute. Pull the plug on her little performance. David smiled, a sharp, wolfish grin. I am sending the email right now. I have a direct contact in their fraud prevention unit from a previous corporate case. They take these violations extremely seriously. Give them 20 minutes to review the irrefutable evidence you provided. We stayed on the video call, watching the clock tick down on my laptop screen. I kept a separate browser tab open to Brianna's fraudulent campaign page. The donation ticker was still climbing steadily. $52,000. $55,000. Innocent people were handing over their hard-earned money to a woman who planned to use it on imported champagne and velvet curtains. The silence in the hospital room was heavy, but deeply satisfying. I was no longer the helpless victim trapped in a dysfunctional family dynamic. I was the architect of their absolute ruin. My screen refreshed automatically. The bright green donate button suddenly flickered and turned gray. The massive total of $55,000 vanished entirely, replaced by a blank space. A bold red banner dropped across the top of the campaign page. This fundraiser has been suspended and is currently under active investigation for violating our terms of service regarding fraudulent misrepresentation. Got them, David announced, his fingers flying across his keyboard. The fraud prevention unit just emailed me back. They verified your geographic data and confirmed the medical spa discrepancy. The campaign is officially frozen. No funds can be withdrawn or transferred out of the holding account. Every single dollar that Brianna collected is now locked down completely. Will the donors get their money back? I asked. Yes, David replied. The platform will automatically initiate a mass refund protocol within 48 hours once they conclude their internal review. But it gets much worse for your sister. By freezing the account for suspected fraud, the platform is legally obligated to file a suspicious activity report with financial regulators. They are locking her out and flagging her identity in the entire banking system. My phone lit up with a notification from a social media platform. The digital mob that had been attacking me relentlessly was suddenly confused. Comments were pouring in asking why the campaign link was dead. People were demanding answers. And then the narrative began to shift. A few sharp-eyed users noticed the red fraud banner. The outrage that had been directed at me began to pivot rapidly toward Brianna. She is going to panic, I said, watching the social media comments multiply. She promised her premium event coordinator $15,000 by 5 o'clock today. She was counting on those stolen donations to cover her tracks. Without that money, the caterers and the decorators are going to walk out. Her entire housewarming party is going to collapse. That brings us to the next phase of our strategy, David said, his tone shifting back to strictly business. The eviction notice has been officially served. The fraud campaign is dismantled. But we still need to address the root of their financial entitlement. They feel invincible because they think Jamal's business provides an endless safety net. They do not know the truth about Jamal's business, I said, leaning forward slightly and ignoring the sharp pain in my back. They do not know who really holds the keys to that particular kingdom. Exactly, David agreed. Jamal is a hard-working man, but his business expansion required significant capital. Capital that he could not secure on his own because his wife ruined his debt-to-income ratio with her hidden credit cards. I pulled up a secure banking portal on my laptop. It was time to play the most devastating card in my entire deck. When Jamal needed that massive commercial loan to open his 3 new fitness centers, the bank denied him. He was devastated. He thought his dream was completely dead. Brianna never cared about his business. She only cared about the lifestyle it provided. So I stepped in quietly behind the scenes. "Are you ready to initiate the withdrawal?" David asked. I stared at the banking portal. I am the silent financial guarantor for Jamal's entire corporate loan portfolio? I stated, my voice echoing with absolute finality. Without my pristine credit score and my substantial asset backing his business accounts are totally exposed. It is time to cut the safety net. Let us freeze his empire. I pulled up the master commercial lending agreement on my laptop. 2 years ago, Jamal came to me in absolute desperation. He had found the perfect commercial real estate to expand his flagship fitness center into a massive 3-location franchise. He had the business plan, he had the projected revenue models, and he had the sheer willpower to make it succeed. But he did not have the credit. Brianna had secretly maxed out 4 joint credit cards to fund her lavish wardrobe, leaving their debt-to-income ratio completely radioactive to any traditional commercial lender. The bank laughed him out of the room. He was crushed. He thought his ultimate dream was over. I stepped in because I respected his work ethic. I respected that he wanted to build something meaningful for his community. But I set one ironclad absolute condition: Brianna could never know. If my sister knew I was financially backing their lifestyle, she would have bled the business dry, assuming I would just cover the inevitable losses. Jamal agreed to the strict secrecy. I signed the paperwork as a silent guarantor, backing his $1 million expansion with my own corporate equity and pristine financial portfolio. I was the invisible pillar holding up his entire kingdom, and now I was pulling that pillar completely out from under them. I opened a new secure email draft, addressed directly to the Senior Vice President of Commercial Lending at the bank holding Jamal portfolio. I copied David on the communication to ensure it carried the full weight of my legal counsel. I began typing with deliberate, calculated keystrokes. To the Commercial Lending Division, I wrote, my eyes scanning the harsh glow of the screen. Effective immediately, I am formally executing my right to withdraw as the primary financial guarantor for the corporate loan accounts associated with Jamal and his fitness franchise. I am initiating this immediate withdrawal under the material adverse change clause of our contract. I have uncovered substantial evidence of suspected embezzlement and severe financial misappropriation occurring within the business accounts by a non-authorized party. Specifically, corporate funds are being aggressively diverted from the official operating accounts to fund unauthorized personal luxury expenses and lavish private events. David watched me type through our open video connection. He nodded in absolute approval as he read the text populating in his inbox. In real time, you are triggering a hard default. He observed, his voice filled with professional respect. The moment they read the word embezzlement, their automated risk management software is going to completely lock down every single account attached to that business tax identification number. That is exactly the point, I replied. Jamal cannot process payroll. He cannot pay his vendors. He cannot even buy a bottle of water using his corporate cards until he submits to a full forensic audit by the bank. They will demand to see every single receipt from the past 12 months. And when they look, they are going to find a massive crater where his operational capital used to be, because his wife spent it all on custom seafood stations and designer handbags. I attached the financial dossier I had compiled earlier. I included the screenshots of Brianna, public payment transfers showing the corporate funds flowing directly to premium event coordinators and luxury medical spas. It was undeniable concrete proof of gross financial misconduct. I moved my cursor over the send button. I felt a brief fleeting pang of guilt for Jamal. He really had worked incredibly hard to build those gyms, but he had chosen to blindly defend the woman who left me to die in a trauma ward. He had chosen to call me up and demand I drop a legal eviction to protect his social standing, while my spine was held together by fresh metal screws. He had demanded loyalty while offering absolutely none in return. The guilt vanished entirely, replaced by the cold reality of consequence. I clicked send. The email vanished from my outbox, flying through cyberspace to land directly on the desk of a corporate banker. David immediately followed up my email by sending the formal legal withdrawal documents, perfectly formatted and electronically notarized. It is done, David announced, leaning back in his leather office chair. The banking executives are highly responsive to fraud alerts. Give it about 10 minutes. Their automated systems will freeze the accounts first to prevent any further capital flight. Then human auditors will take over. We waited in a tense, highly charged silence. The hospital room felt completely disconnected from the financial devastation I had just unleashed upon my own family. I watched the clock on the bottom right corner of my laptop screen. 5 minutes passed. Then 7, then 10. At exactly 12 minutes, my phone began to light up. It was not a call. It was a rapid-fire sequence of text messages from Jamal Natalie. What did you just do? He wrote, the panic evident even through the digital text. My corporate cards were just declined at the equipment supplier. A second message arrived immediately after I just tried to log into the banking portal, and it says my access is suspended due to a fraud investigation. Natalie, answer me. Did you pull your backing? I stared at the messages, refusing to type a single word in response. Let him sweat. Let the reality of his situation crash into him, the exact same way that semi-truck had crashed into me. Another message popped up. The bank just called me. They are talking about a material adverse change. They are talking about embezzlement. What is going on, Natalie? This is my entire life. Please tell me you did not do this. I locked my phone and set it face down on the rolling hospital tray. He is completely locked out. I told David, my voice echoing in the quiet room. The bank triggered the freeze. His entire financial operation is suspended. David let out a low whistle. David let out a low whistle through the laptop speakers. You just dropped a financial nuclear bomb on his entire life, Natalie. He is not going to just sit there and send text messages. He is a man of action. He is going to come down to the hospital to face you in person. I know, I replied, adjusting the controls on my hospital bed to sit up slightly straighter. My spine screamed in absolute protest, but I needed to project total authority. Let him come. I am done dealing with proxies and angry text messages. If he wants to scream at me, he can do it while looking at the heavy titanium brace holding my crushed vertebrae together. I advise extreme caution. David warned, his face serious on the screen. He is a large, physically imposing man whose entire life savings and business reputation have just been paralyzed. Desperate people are incredibly unpredictable. Do you want me to call hospital security to stand by your door just in case? No, I said firmly. Jamal is angry and he is completely blind to his wife manipulations, but he is not a violent man, he is a logical business owner who is currently operating under false information. When he gets here, I am going to give him the missing variables to his financial equation. Just stay on the open video line, David. I want you as a legal witness to every single word spoken in this room. I closed my email client and pulled up the shadow audit file on my desktop screen. The hospital room was silent, except for the rhythmic beeping of my heart monitor. I watched the heavy wooden door of the intensive care unit waiting for the inevitable arrival. It did not take long. Less than 40 minutes later, the door to my room flew open with enough force to bang loudly against the rubber wall. Stop. Jamal stood in the doorway, breathing heavily. He was wearing his branded gym apparel, and his face was slick with fresh sweat. He looked like he had literally sprinted from the parking garage all the way to the trauma floor. His massive frame filled the doorway, projecting pure, frantic energy. "What did you do, Natalie?" he demanded, his deep voice echoing loudly in the sterile room. He stepped inside and let the door swing shut behind him. "I just spent the last half hour on the phone with the Senior Vice President of Commercial Lending. They told me my primary guarantor pulled out citing a material adverse change and suspected corporate embezzlement. My payroll accounts are completely frozen. My vendor accounts are totally locked. I have private contractors literally standing inside my new facility right now, waiting for their supply checks to clear, and I cannot pay them a single dime. You just bankrupted my entire life." I looked at him with absolute cold calm. "I did not bankrupt you. Jamal," I stated clearly, "I stopped you from bleeding out entirely. There is a massive difference." "Do not give me your corporate auditor double talk," he shouted, pacing the short distance at the foot of my hospital bed. "You are doing this to punish Brianna because of your petty family drama. You handed us an eviction notice and now you are trying to destroy the community business I built with my bare hands. Brianna was right about you. You are completely toxic and deeply jealous of our happiness. I let him vent. I let the anger pour out of him because I knew it was fueled by pure financial terror. He had spent years building his fitness empire as a proud Black entrepreneur, creating safe wellness spaces for his community, and now it was slipping through his fingers. When he finally stopped pacing and glared at me, breathing hard, I spoke with surgical precision. "Jamal, you are a smart man." I began, keeping my tone completely even. "You run a multi-million-dollar operation. You know exactly how strict commercial banking regulations are. Do you honestly believe a major commercial bank would freeze a massive corporate loan portfolio just because a guarantor got into a petty family argument? Do you think they would trigger a hard default without seeing undeniable concrete proof of financial misconduct?" Jamal froze, his broad shoulders tensed as the cold logic of my words collided with the fragile narrative his wife had fed him. He opened his mouth to argue but closed it again. "They saw the evidence, Jamal." I continued, pressing the immediate advantage I sent them. "The exact same financial dossier. I am about to show you. I am a senior risk auditor. I do not make wild accusations based on emotional family drama. I make them based on transaction histories, routing numbers, and authenticated vendor receipts. There is no embezzlement, Jamal insisted, but his voice had lost its thunderous conviction. It sounded hollow and defensive now. I handle the primary business accounts myself. Brianna only manages the household budget and the minor marketing expenses for the gyms. She does not even have access to the main capital expansion funds. I made sure of that. Are you absolutely sure about that? I asked, tilting my head against the stiff pillow. When was the last time you personally reviewed the individual line item expenditures on the secondary corporate credit cards? When was the last time you independently verified the vendors? Brianna claimed she was paying for marketing and event planning. I check the balance sheets every single month, Jamal said, wiping a shaking hand across his sweating forehead. The numbers always balance out perfectly. She hands me the expense reports, and I approve them. We are a partnership. We are a team. She hands you the expense reports. I repeated, emphasizing the massive blind spot in his accounting process. She gives you a printed piece of paper with numbers on it, and you believe her because she is your wife. But you never actually log into the secondary portal to verify the payee names yourself. Do you? You blindly trust her to manage the microtransactions while you focus entirely on the macro expansion. The hostility in Jamal's eyes was rapidly shifting into a desperate, creeping panic. He walked over to the single visitor chair in the corner of the room and collapsed into it. Putting his heavy head in his hands, he looked up at me, and the furious anger was entirely gone, replaced by a profound investigative urgency. "What exactly did you send to the bank, Natalie?" he asked, his voice dropping to a low, strained whisper. "What did you find in those accounts?" I reached for my laptop resting on the rolling tray table and turned the bright screen so it faced him directly. "I found the absolute truth." "Jamal," I said softly, "I found out exactly how your wife is funding her luxurious lifestyle behind your back. I found out where your hard-earned operational capital is really going." I pushed the laptop closer to the edge of the table so Jamal could see the screen. The spreadsheet I built was color-coded, reflecting hours of digital forensic work. It detailed a horrifying pattern of financial abuse. Jamal leaned forward, scanning the rows and columns of data. At first, he just looked confused, as if reading a document written in a foreign language. "Look at the column highlighted in bright yellow," I instructed, pointing at the screen. "Those represent the transactions Brianna categorized as marketing expenses for your 3 fitness centers over the past 24 months. You signed off on these expense reports every single quarter, believing she was paying advertising agencies and social media managers to promote your brand." Jamal nodded slowly, his brow furrowed. "Yes," he replied, his voice hesitant. "She handled all our localized marketing outreach. She showed me the invoices from a company called Apex Digital Media. They were driving great local engagement, so I never questioned the retainer fees." I pressed a key, bringing up a secondary window overlaid on the spreadsheet. "Apex Digital Media does not exist," Jamal, I stated, brutally stripping away the illusion. I ran the vendor identification numbers through the state corporate registry. "It is a completely fake shell company. Your wife set up a dummy limited liability corporation purely to generate fake marketing invoices." Jamal stared at the screen, his breathing shallow. "What do you mean it does not exist? I have seen the metrics. I have seen the campaign reports she printed for our quarterly meetings." "She manufactured those reports," I explained, pulling up a side-by-side comparison. "The engagement numbers she showed you were completely fabricated. Now look at where the money actually went once it hit the holding account." I traced the outgoing wire transfers through her public digital payment applications. She was incredibly sloppy with her digital footprint. She left her transaction history open to the public, thinking no one would ever bother to look closely. I scrolled down the page, revealing a categorized list of luxury retail purchases. Instead of buying advertisements, Brianna was transferring your corporate operating capital directly to high-end fashion boutiques, luxury shoe designers, and exclusive jewelry brokers. That $5,000 monthly marketing retainer went toward buying limited edition handbags and custom heels. Jamal physically recoiled from the laptop screen as if it had burned him. He rubbed his face vigorously with both hands, trying to process the betrayal. How much, he asked, his voice cracking with raw emotion. How much did she take from the business accounts? Over the past 24 months, I answered, keeping my tone analytical to prevent him from shutting down. Brianna embezzled exactly $120,000 from your corporate operating accounts. $120,000. Jamal repeated the number, echoing like a death sentence. That is impossible. I would have noticed that much cash missing. I review the balance sheets. The numbers always lined up perfectly at the end of the year. They lined up because she was simultaneously pulling from your quarterly tax reserve accounts to cover the massive holes she created in the daily operating budget. I explained, highlighting a section of the spreadsheet coded in red. You thought you had a healthy tax reserve sitting in the secondary business accounts waiting for the end of the fiscal year. But Brianna has been actively draining those funds to hide the missing marketing money. You are currently facing a massive catastrophic tax liability, and you do not even know it yet. Jamal looked like he was going to be physically sick. He gripped the edges of his chair, his knuckles turning white. He stared at the screen, watching his hard-earned legacy dissolve into thin air. He had worked 80-hour weeks, missed holidays, and sacrificed his own health to build those gyms. And his wife had stolen the foundation right out from under him to fund a fake high society lifestyle. And then there is the housewarming party. I continued, deciding to deliver the final crushing blow while he was already absorbing the impact. You gave her a strict $5,000 budget for the event, but she secretly hired a premium event coordinator, ordered a massive custom seafood station, and demanded an imported champagne tower. The total cost for the party this weekend is actually $20,000. Jamal shook his head vehemently, refusing to believe it. She cannot pay for that. She knows my capital is tied up in the expansion. She does not have that kind of money sitting around. She planned to pay for it using the charitable donations from the fraudulent crowdfunding campaign she launched against me today, I revealed, watching his eyes widen in absolute horror. She weaponized my medical emergency to extort sympathy cash from strangers on the internet. And when my lawyer and I legally dismantled her campaign and froze the stolen funds this afternoon, she panicked. That is why she came into this hospital room and demanded I wire her $15,000. She is completely out of cash, Jamal. The event coordinators are threatening to walk out and expose her fake luxury lifestyle to your entire extended family. Jamal sat in the visitor chair, completely paralyzed by the sheer volume of deception. He had marched into my hospital room, ready to defend his pregnant wife against a cruel, vindictive sister. Instead, he found a meticulously documented financial trail, proving his wife was a calculating thief who had systematically looted his business. She stole from me, Jamal whispered, staring blankly at the floor. She stole from the business. She jeopardized the entire expansion. She risked everything I built just to buy designer bags and expensive champagne. Why would she do this to us? We have a baby on the way. How could she risk our child's future like this? I looked at Jamal, feeling a genuine wave of profound sadness for the man. He was a good person who had been completely manipulated by a master narcissist. He thought the worst was over. He thought the financial devastation was the bottom of the barrel. But I still held one final card in my hand, and it was going to break his heart entirely. Jamal. I said, my voice softening slightly, as I prepared to drop the most devastating truth of all. There is something else you need to see right now, something much worse than the missing money. I pulled up a separate folder on my desktop labeled medical. Jamal looked at the screen with absolute dread. He was drowning in the reality of his stolen capital, but the true depth of Brianna deception was about to drag him completely under. I clicked open a series of credit card statements and placed the laptop on the rolling tray table. Look at these specific charges, I instructed, keeping my voice as gentle as I possibly could. These are the payments Brianna has been making over the last 2 months to a facility called the Oasis Wellness Institute. She claimed on her fraudulent crowdfunding campaign that she was using these exact funds to pay for high-risk prenatal care. She told the entire internet that she needed thousands of dollars to ensure the safe delivery of your child. Jamal stared at the line items. Yes, he said, his voice thick with confusion. She told me she found an exclusive private clinic that specializes in high-risk pregnancies. She asked me for extra cash to cover the initial consultations, but I told her my capital was locked up in the gym expansion. She said she would figure it out. I thought she was just using her personal savings. She did not use her savings, I replied flatly. She used the money she embezzled from your tax reserve accounts and the money she scammed from strangers online. But that is not even the worst part, Jamal. I want you to read the official business registration for the Oasis Wellness Institute. I opened a new window showing the State Medical Board registry. Jamal leaned in close, reading the screen. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking physically ill. Oasis Wellness Institute is not an obstetrics clinic. They do not have a single medical doctor on staff who specializes in prenatal care. What is it? Jamal asked, a terrifying realization beginning to form in his eyes. It is a high-end cosmetic medical spa, I stated clearly, stripping away the final layer of Brianna's absolute delusion. They specialize in dermal fillers, Botox injections, laser hair removal, and non-surgical fat reduction. I pulled up the itemized receipts that my attorney legally subpoenaed. Over the past 8 weeks, while she claimed to be suffering from severe morning sickness and pregnancy complications, Brianna spent $9,000 on cosmetic facial injectables and body contouring sessions. Jamal stood up from the visitor chair so fast it tipped backward and crashed onto the hospital floor. He backed away from the laptop, shaking his head back and forth. "No," he stammered, holding his hands up as if trying to physically block the words coming out of my mouth. "No, Natalie, that cannot be right. I saw the ultrasound pictures. She has been waking up sick every single morning. We are building a nursery in the new house." I looked at him with profound pity. "Jamal, you can buy fake ultrasound photos on the internet for $20. People use them for prank videos all the time. She is not waking up with morning sickness. She is waking up with hangovers because she has been secretly drinking imported champagne while you are working early morning shifts at the gym. She is not pregnant. She was never pregnant. There is no baby." The sheer brutality of the truth hit him like a physical blow. He stumbled backward, hitting the wall of my hospital room, and slowly slid down until he was sitting on the cold linoleum floor. He pulled his knees to his chest and buried his face in his hands. The sound that came out of him was a low, guttural sob of a man mourning a child that never existed. I gave him a moment to process the ultimate betrayal. Finding out your spouse fabricated an entire human life to manipulate you is a profound psychological trauma. Why? Jamal whispered, his voice muffled by his hands. Why would she invent a baby? Why would she do something so incredibly evil? Because she was running out of time and she needed leverage, I explained methodically. She knew you were eventually going to find out about the missing money. She knew the commercial loan auditors would look at the books. She needed to trap you, Jamal. She needed to make sure that when you finally discovered the embezzlement, you would feel far too guilty to leave a pregnant woman. She used the fake baby as an ultimate insurance policy against divorce. I paused, letting him absorb the calculated malice of her plan. And she used the fake pregnancy to extort our mother, I continued. Patricia is absolutely obsessed with the idea of having a perfect grandchild to show off to her high society friends. Brianna knew that if she played the victim and claimed the pregnancy was high risk, Patricia would blindly hand over whatever cash she demanded without asking any questions. She created this entire narrative to exploit both of you simultaneously. Jamal slowly lifted his head from his hands. His eyes were completely bloodshot, and his jaw was clenched so tight the muscles twitched under his skin. The grief that had paralyzed him just moments ago was rapidly transforming into something else entirely, The shock was fading and a cold, calculated fury was taking its place. He stood up, brushing the dust off his athletic pants, and picked up the fallen visitor chair. He walked back over to my hospital bed and looked directly at the screen displaying the fabricated medical bills and the stolen corporate funds. He studied the numbers for a long time, committing the evidence of his wife's betrayal to memory. When he finally looked back at me, his expression was completely unrecognizable. The loving, devoted husband who had sprinted into my hospital room to defend his wife was gone forever. Tell me exactly what I need to do to destroy her perfect fake life, Jamal demanded, his voice dropping to absolute zero today. I looked at Jamal and saw the clarity of a man who had nothing to lose. I told him to go home and act normal. I instructed him to let Brianna continue planning her massive housewarming party. I promised him my lawyer David would handle the commercial bank freeze and help him quietly separate his finances from her fraudulent accounts. Jamal nodded. He thanked me, turned around, and walked out of the hospital room with terrifying purpose. I closed my laptop and leaned back into the stiff hospital bed. The physical toll of the last few hours was catching up to me. The surgical incision along my spine throbbed, but I felt incredibly light. The heavy chains of my toxic family were finally breaking. I closed my eyes, expecting to get a few hours of rest before the next phase of my plan. But peace is a luxury you never truly get when dealing with a malignant narcissist. Less than an hour later, the heavy door to my room flew open again. Patricia marched in looking frantic but armed with a desperate, dangerous kind of confidence. She was flanked by two hospital administrators and an uncomfortable-looking psychiatric evaluation nurse. Patricia pointed a manicured finger directly at my bed. "There she is," Patricia announced, her voice dripping with fake maternal concern. "My daughter suffered severe head trauma during her car accident, and the heavy narcotics are clearly causing extreme paranoid delusions. She is making wild accusations and destroying our family." I watched in cold fascination as my mother just laid out her ultimate trap. She turned to the lead hospital administrator and handed over a thick manila folder. "I am her mother and her legally designated medical proxy," Patricia stated firmly. "I have the signed medical power of attorney. Right here I am, formally invoking my right to declare Natalie mentally unfit to make her own medical and financial decisions. She needs to be placed on an involuntary psychiatric hold immediately for her own safety. As her proxy, I need immediate access to her financial accounts to manage her estate while she is incapacitated." Her motive was brutally transparent. If she could have me declared legally incompetent, she could instantly invalidate the 30-day eviction notice I had served her. She could drain my bank accounts to save Brianna from her financial collapse. She was willing to lock her own daughter in a psychiatric ward just to keep her lifestyle intact. The hospital administrator looked down at the paperwork in his hands and then looked at me. He seemed highly skeptical, but legally obligated to investigate the claim. "Miss Natalie," he began cautiously, "your mother has presented a signed power of attorney document dated 3 years ago. Given the severe nature of your injuries and the heavy pain management protocol, we have to take claims of diminished capacity seriously." Before I could even open my mouth to defend myself, the privacy curtain near the door was pulled back. David stepped forward, adjusting his suit jacket he had never left the hospital. He had been working in the private waiting lounge down the hall, and the nurses had alerted him the moment Patricia arrived with the administration staff. "That document is completely null and void," David announced, his voice slicing through the room like a steel blade. He walked up to the hospital administrator and handed over a freshly printed, legally stamped document. "I am Natalie, corporate attorney, and her sole legal proxy. I filed the official revocation of Patricia medical power of attorney directly with the hospital chief of medicine prior to my client emergency spinal surgery 2 days ago. The document Patricia just handed you is legally defunct." Patricia snatched the paper from the administrator, her eyes scanning the official revocation. Her face turned red. "This is fake," she shrieked, her mother, persona instantly dissolving into pure rage. She is out of her mind, and this lawyer is manipulating her to steal her money. I am her mother. I demand you evaluate her right now. You should be very careful about your next words, Patricia, David warned, stepping between her and my hospital bed. Because presenting a revoked power of attorney to a medical facility in a deliberate attempt to seize financial assets is considered felony fraud. You are actively attempting to commit dependent adult financial abuse against a physically immobilized patient. As if summoned by David. Perfectly timed legal threat. Two uniformed hospital police officers stepped into the room. The nurses at the main station had called them when Patricia started making a scene in the hallway earlier. The lead officer looked at the hospital administrator, who shook his head and pointed at Patricia. The officer said, placing a firm hand on his utility belt. We have verified that your proxy documents are invalid. You are currently attempting to execute a fraudulent legal document to seize control of a patient's finances. You need to step away from the bed right now. Patricia looked at the police officers, then, at the hospital, administrators who were glaring at her with absolute disgust. Finally, she looked at me. I did not blink. I did not flinch. I just stared back at her from my plastic spinal brace, watching her entire world collapse. She realized in that exact moment that she had absolutely no power left over me. Her ultimate weapon had been completely neutralized by my foresight. You are going to regret this, Natalie. Patricia hissed, her voice venomous but shaking with genuine fear as the officers stepped closer. You are destroying your own blood. You are choosing to be completely alone. I am choosing to be safe, I replied coldly. Take your fake documents and go pack your boxes. Mom, the clock on your eviction is ticking down. The officers escorted a sputtering, humiliated Patricia out of the trauma unit, leaving me and David alone once again to prepare for the final devastating act of this entire ordeal. Saturday evening arrived with a storm brewing over the city, but inside the Maplewood property the atmosphere was suffocatingly warm and lavish. I received a stream of updates from the private investigator David hired to keep eyes on the residents. Through a secure messaging application, I watched the evening unfold in real time from my hospital bed as I prepared for discharge. Brianna was moving forward with the massive housewarming party exactly as predicted. Her arrogance would not allow her to cancel an event that served as the ultimate stage for her manufactured life. She believed the frozen crowdfunding campaign was a temporary digital glitch she could smooth over on Monday morning. She believed Patricia would somehow find a legal loophole to invalidate my eviction notice. Most dangerously, she believed her husband remained oblivious to her financial theft and fabricated pregnancy. The investigator sent high-resolution photographs to my phone. The house looked completely unrecognizable from when my late father owned it. Brianna had spared no expense blowing through Jamal's stolen corporate reserves to transform the property into a monument to her vanity. Through the glowing screen of my phone, I saw the velvet curtains hanging in the main living room. They were indeed hunter green, catching the warm, ambient lighting of the crystal chandeliers she installed without permission. A custom ice sculpture sat in the center of the dining room, surrounded by the premium seafood station she begged me to finance. Waiters in white uniforms circulated through the crowded rooms, carrying silver trays of imported champagne and rare caviar. The guest list was a mix of local high society influencers and Jamal's extended family. Jamal came from a highly respected lineage of Black professionals and community leaders. His parents were retired university professors, and his siblings included a corporate executive and a local politician. Brianna invited all of them specifically to parade her stolen wealth and solidify her position as the perfect devoted wife. She used their legitimate social standing to elevate her fraudulent brand. In the photographs, Brianna was wearing a tailored ivory gown that flared out just enough to suggest the early stages of a pregnancy that did not exist. She was mingling with the affluent guests, placing her hand delicately over her flat stomach every time someone offered congratulations. She accepted expensive baby gifts and played the role of the glowing, expectant mother with sickening perfection. She smiled brightly for the hired event photographer, projecting an image of absolute domestic bliss. The most fascinating part of the updates was watching Jamal. I had explicitly instructed him to act completely normal, to play the role of the loving provider until the trap was fully set. He was executing that directive with chilling precision. The photograph showed him standing by the marble fireplace holding a glass of bourbon, chatting amiably with his investors and family members. He wore a tailored navy blue suit and a relaxed smile, but I knew exactly what was hiding behind his calm eyes. I knew he spent the last 48 hours quietly opening secure bank accounts, changing corporate passwords, and legally severing his business assets from Brianna's name. He had already met with a divorce attorney. He was standing in that lavish living room, watching his wife spend the last drops of his stolen money, knowing the charade was about to implode violently. My physical therapist arrived in my hospital room, holding a custom-fitted mobility chair. My spinal fusion was healing remarkably well, but I still needed maximum support to travel safely. I transitioned from the hospital bed to the mobility chair, wincing as a sharp spike of pain shot down my lower back. I wore a tailored blazer over my rigid spinal brace. I was not going to show up to my property looking like a fragile medical victim. I would show up looking like the financial executioner I was trained to be. David walked into my room holding a thick leather portfolio containing the finalized legal documents. "The county sheriff is waiting for us at the end of Maplewood Drive," David announced, checking his wristwatch. "He has the authorized eviction mandate and the commercial fraud warrants ready to execute." Jamal gave us the green light. "The party is at maximum capacity, and Brianna is preparing to give her welcome speech." "Perfect," I replied, gripping the armrests of my mobility chair. "Let her get everyone's attention. Let her command the room. The higher she climbs on that pedestal, the harder the impact will be when we kick it out from under her." David pushed my chair down the quiet hospital corridor toward the private exit. We loaded into a specially equipped transport van and drove through the dark, slick city streets toward the affluent suburban neighborhood. My heart pounded with a cold, metallic rhythm. For 33 years, I allowed these people to shrink me down to a manageable size. I allowed them to dictate my worth and steal my peace. Tonight, I took back every single thing they stole. The van turned onto Maplewood Drive. The street was packed with luxury vehicles belonging to the party guests. Valet drivers were jogging back and forth under the streetlights. Through the massive front windows of the house, I saw the crowded party in full swing. The van came to a smooth halt directly behind a marked police cruiser. A uniformed county sheriff stepped out of his vehicle and walked over to our transport. He tipped his hat to David and looked at me with a serious expression. "We are ready when you are," Miss Natalie, the sheriff stated, resting his hand on his utility belt. I looked at the glowing windows of my house. I saw Brianna standing on the grand staircase, tapping a spoon against a crystal glass to silence the wealthy crowd for her grand speech. She was smiling her perfect fake smile. "Let us go inside," I said. "Let us go inside," I said. David gripped the handles of my mobility chair and pushed me up the wide paved driveway. The rain had started to fall in heavy freezing sheets, but I barely felt the cold. The county sheriff walked methodically by my side, his heavy boots crunching against the wet gravel. As we approached the grand double doors of the Maplewood property, the muffled sounds of live jazz music and raucous laughter grew louder. Through the frosted glass panels, I could see the silhouettes of wealthy guests moving about the foyer, completely oblivious to the legal storm that was about to shatter their exclusive evening. A private security guard hired by Brianna stood by the entrance wearing a cheap suit and a confused expression. He stepped forward, holding up his hand to stop us, but the county sheriff simply flashed his bright silver badge and held up a thick manila folder containing the court-ordered mandate. The guard immediately stepped back and pulled the heavy oak doors open for us without saying a single word. We crossed the threshold, stepping from the freezing rain into the suffocating heat of my sister-manufactured kingdom. The contrast was physically jarring. The foyer smelled heavily of expensive perfume, roasted garlic from the catering station, and fresh-cut lilies. To my right, a jazz quartet was playing an upbeat melody in the corner of the dining room. To my left, waiters in crisp white uniforms were passing out flutes of vintage champagne to the affluent guests. And right in the center of it all, standing halfway up the grand sweeping staircase, was Brianna. She had a crystal flute in one hand, and her other hand was resting gently on her flat stomach. The crowd of 75 guests was gathered around the base of the stairs, looking up at her with rapt attention. Jamal stood near the bottom step, his hands clasped behind his back, watching his wife deliver her speech, with an expression carved out of solid stone. Patricia was standing right next to him, beaming with pure narcissistic pride, as she watched her golden child command the attention of the high society crowd. "We are just so incredibly blessed," Brianna projected her voice echoing through the massive living room. "When Jamal and I first walked into this beautiful house, we knew immediately that this was where we wanted to plant our roots. We knew this was where we wanted to build our legacy and raise our growing family. This house represents all of our hard work and our dedication to each other." A murmur of polite applause rippled through the crowd. Patricia dabbed at the corner of her eye with a silk tissue, playing the role of the overwhelmed emotional grandmother to absolute perfection. "I wanted tonight to be a celebration, not just of our new home, but of the amazing community that supports us." Brianna continued raising her champagne flute higher. "To family, to love, and to the beautiful future we are building right here within these walls." I nodded to David. He pushed my mobility chair forward, moving us past the entryway and directly onto the edge of the plush hunter green velvet rug that had caused the original panic attack. The rubber wheels of my chair squeaked sharply against the polished hardwood floor. The county sheriff stepped up right beside me, his hand resting heavily on his radio. The guests standing near the back of the crowd noticed us first. A woman in a silver sequined dress gasped and took a step backward, bumping into a waiter. The clinking of glasses suddenly stopped. The ripple of confusion spread through the room like a physical wave. The jazz quartet, noticing the sudden shift in the atmosphere, faltered, and the music awkwardly died out, leaving a heavy, suffocating silence in its wake. The sea of wealthy guests slowly parted, creating a clear, unobstructed path between my wheelchair and the grand staircase. Patricia turned around, annoyed by the sudden interruption to her daughter's big moment. When her eyes landed on me, her mouth dropped open in sheer horror. She looked at my rigid spinal brace, then at David, holding his leather briefcase, and finally at the uniformed county sheriff standing tall by my side. All the color drained from Patricia's face, leaving her looking like a terrified ghost under the warm ambient lighting. Brianna lowered her champagne glass, her fake radiant smile freezing into a grotesque mask of confusion. She squinted through the bright lights of the chandeliers, trying to comprehend the scene unfolding in her living room. "Natalie," she stammered, her voice completely losing its theatrical projection. "What on earth are you doing here? You are supposed to be in the hospital. And why is there a police officer in my house? This is not your house, Brianna." I stated, my voice cutting through the dead silence of the room with absolute lethal precision. I did not yell. I did not scream. I spoke with the calm, measured authority of an auditor delivering a final catastrophic financial assessment. It never was. The guests began whispering frantically to one another. Jamal family members exchanged alarmed glances, stepping away from the staircase to distance themselves from the unfolding disaster. "You are ruining my housewarming party!" Brianna shrieked, her voice pitching upward in panic as she gripped the wooden banister tightly. "You are having a mental breakdown. Mom, call the hospital right now. Tell them she escaped the psychiatric ward." Patricia did not move. She was paralyzed, staring at the legal documents in the sheriff's hand. She knew exactly what those papers meant. She knew her attempt to declare me mentally unfit had failed spectacularly, and now the consequences had finally arrived at her front door. The county sheriff stepped forward, projecting his voice loudly, holding up the stamped court order for all the guests to see. I am executing a finalized legal eviction mandate immediately. You are trespassing right now. The absolute finality of the sheriff's words hung in the air like a physical weight. You are trespassing right now. The sheer absurdity of hearing those words at a lavish housewarming party sent a shockwave through the room. Several guests immediately placed their champagne flutes on the nearest tables and began quietly backing toward the coat check. No one in high society wanted to be caught in the background of a police raid. Brianna gripped the mahogany banister so tightly her knuckles turned stark white. She looked from the uniformed officer to me, and then down to her husband. "Jamal," she cried out, her voice shrill and desperate. "Do not just stand there. Do something. Tell this officer who we are. Tell him we live here. Call our lawyers and have this ridiculous piece of paper thrown out. She is trying to extort us. Just write her a check so she leaves us alone." Jamal did not move a single muscle. He remained planted at the bottom of the staircase, his expression completely unreadable. I shifted in my mobility chair, feeling the rigid plastic brace supporting my spine. "You cannot write a check to stop an eviction on a property you do not own, Brianna," I stated clearly, ensuring my voice carried to the very back of the crowded living room. "And Jamal cannot call his lawyers to fight for a lease that was legally terminated. I bought this property from the bank 5 years ago to save our mother from bankruptcy. I allowed you both to live here rent-free. But after you ignored my emergency hospital calls and left me to face permanent paralysis over a pair of velvet curtains, I revoked that privilege." Patricia pushed her way through the whispering guests, her face a mask of furious desperation. She marched right up to the sheriff, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You cannot listen to her," Patricia yelled. "She is a disgruntled, jealous sister trying to ruin a beautiful family event. We have established residency here. We have rights. You cannot just throw a pregnant woman out into the freezing rain." David, my attorney, stepped calmly in front of my chair, acting as a physical barrier. "Actually, Patricia, you have no tenant rights remaining," David explained with surgical precision. "The 30-day notice was legally served and subsequently expedited due to your documented attempt to commit dependent adult financial abuse at the hospital yesterday. When you presented a revoked medical proxy to seize my client assets, you forfeited any legal leniency. The judge signed the immediate removal order this morning." Brianna let out a sound that was half sob and half scream. She scrambled down 2 steps, reaching her hand out toward her husband. "Jamal, please," she begged, tears streaming down her carefully contoured face. "This is our dream home. We already moved all our things inside. We are building a nursery for our baby. Just buy the house from her. You have the capital from the fitness center expansion. Buy the house right now so we can kick her out of our party." The crowd murmured in agreement. To the wealthy guests looking on, throwing money at the problem seemed like the most logical solution. I looked at my younger sister, absorbing the sheer magnitude of her delusion. She really believed she could just buy her way out of consequence. She believed the stolen money she used to build her fake life would somehow protect her from reality. "You cannot buy this house, Brianna," I announced, my voice dropping to a terrifying calm, "because I no longer own it." The whispering in the room instantly died down. The absolute silence that followed was deafening. Patricia spun around to face me, her eyes wide with fresh panic. "What do you mean you no longer own it?" she demanded, her voice cracking. "Who did you sell it to? We have been living here for 5 years. You cannot just sell the property out from under us without offering us the right of first refusal." "I sold it this afternoon," I replied, keeping my gaze locked on Brianna. "I sold it at a steep discount to a private buyer who needed to secure an immediate real estate investment. I liquidated the asset to rid myself of a toxic liability. I transferred the deed and the new owner took immediate absolute possession." Brianna stared at me, her chest heaving as she struggled to comprehend the financial maneuver. "Who?" she shrieked, the carefully constructed mask of the elegant hostess shattering completely. "Who bought my house?" Jamal finally moved. He took 2 slow, deliberate steps forward, separating himself from the base of the staircase and turning to face his wife. He reached inside the breast pocket of his tailored navy blue suit. He did not pull out his wallet to write a check. He pulled out a folded stack of heavy legal documents, stamped with the official county seal. I did. Jamal stated, his deep voice resonating with absolute commanding authority. I bought the house. Brianna froze. The fake tears instantly stopped falling from her eyes. She looked at the documents in his hand and then up at his face. Her mouth formed a silent question, but her vocal cords refused to cooperate. Jamal unfolded the papers, holding the top page up for her to see. It is a warranty deed, he explained, his tone completely devoid of any affection or warmth. Natalie lifted the freeze on my commercial accounts, just long enough for me to authorize a wire transfer this afternoon. I purchased the Maplewood property through a newly formed private limited liability corporation. A corporation that is registered solely in my name, preventing it from becoming marital property. Patricia stumbled backward, bumping into a tall cocktail table. Crystal glasses rattled dangerously. Jamal, what are you saying? She gasped, looking at her son-in-law as if he had grown a second head. You bought the house, but that is wonderful news. That means Brianna and I can stay. You own it now, so the eviction does not matter anymore. We can just continue with the party. Jamal slowly turned his head to look at Patricia. His eyes were cold enough to freeze boiling water. You fundamentally misunderstand the situation, Patricia, he said quietly. Natalie serving an eviction notice is no longer the primary issue tonight. As the new sole legal owner of this property, I am the one enforcing the removal order right now. Brianna let out a sharp, terrified gasp. Jamal, honey, what are you doing? She pleaded, taking another step down the staircase. Why are you acting like this? We are a team. We are having a baby. Do not you dare mention that fake child to me ever again. Jamal roared, his voice booming like thunder, causing several guests to physically flinch. I sat in my mobility chair, watching the ultimate transfer of power execute flawlessly. I had audited the risk, isolated the liability, and handed the executioner's sword directly to the man my sister had wronged the most. Jamal held the deed to the property, but more importantly, he finally held the absolute truth. And he was about to unleash it in front of every single person Brianna had ever tried to impress. The house fell completely silent. The jazz band stood frozen. The ultimate reckoning had finally arrived. Jamal looked down at the woman he had loved and provided for with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. The silence in the grand living room was so absolute that the sound of the freezing rain lashing against the massive front windows sounded like a barrage of stones. Every wealthy influencer, every potential business investor, and every single member of the extended family stood perfectly still, waiting for the explosion. Brianna tried to reach for his hand again, but Jamal took a deliberate step backward. He looked out over the sea of well-dressed guests and cleared his throat. I want to thank you all for coming tonight. Jamal began, his voice projecting with the commanding resonance he usually reserved for his fitness seminars. You were invited here to celebrate our new home and our growing family. But since the legal owner of this property has just initiated a formal eviction, I think it is only fair that you know exactly how this party was funded. Jamal reached into his tailored suit jacket again and retrieved a thick folded manila envelope. He held it up for the entire room to see. My wife told me she was managing our household budget. She told me she was paying for our local marketing outreach to help build the community fitness centers I poured my entire life into. What she was actually doing was systematically embezzling $120,000 from my corporate tax reserve accounts. A collective gasp ripped through the crowd. Several business investors exchanged dark, furious glances. She stole from our family business, Jamal continued, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. She stole the capital meant to serve our community, and she funneled it through fake shell companies to buy designer handbags, luxury shoes, and the imported champagne you are currently drinking. When she drained my accounts completely, she tried to pay for this extravagant party by setting up a fraudulent crowdfunding campaign online. She weaponized the tragic car accident of my sister-in-law to extort money from innocent strangers. Brianna covered her face with her hands, letting out a high-pitched wail. Jamal, Please stop, she sobbed, her voice muffled. Please, do not do this in front of everyone. Patricia stepped forward, her maternal instinct to protect her golden child overriding her common sense. You are lying, Patricia shrieked, pointing an accusing finger at Jamal. My daughter would never do such a thing. She is pregnant with your child. You are stressing a high-risk mother. The stress could hurt my grandchild. Jamal slowly turned his piercing gaze toward Patricia. He did not yell. The absolute deadly calm in his voice was far more terrifying than any shout could ever be. There is no grandchild, Patricia. There never was a baby. The entire room seemed to suck in a collective breath. Brianna sank to her knees on the mahogany staircase, burying her face in the plush green velvet runner. Jamal pulled a secondary stack of papers from the envelope and tossed them directly at the feet of Patricia. They scattered across the polished hardwood floor, revealing high-resolution copies of credit card statements and medical records. She is not suffering from morning sickness, Jamal stated bluntly. She faked the entire pregnancy to prevent me from looking into the missing corporate funds. She took the money she stole from my business and the charity funds she scammed from the internet, and she spent it at a luxury cosmetic medical spa. She spent $9,000 on facial injectables and body contouring, while claiming she needed high-risk prenatal care. The utter depravity of the revelation broke the polite decorum of the high society crowd. Murmurs of pure disgust rippled through the room. Several guests immediately set their champagne glasses down on the nearest tables and turned their backs on Brianna, looking at her with undisguised revulsion. The mother of Jamal let out a sharp cry of heartbreak, leaning heavily against her husband for support. You are a monster, Patricia, one of the sisters of Jamal called out from the crowd, her voice dripping with venom. Both of you are absolute frauds. Jamal looked down at his sobbing wife. He reached into his jacket one final time and pulled out a crisp legal document, bound in a blue backing folder. He dropped it onto the stairs right next to the trembling hands of Brianna. Those are formal divorce papers, Jamal announced. My lawyers drafted them this afternoon. I have already secured an emergency financial injunction freezing all of your access to my remaining personal and business accounts. You have absolutely nothing left. Jamal turned his back on his wife and looked directly at the county sheriff standing beside my mobility chair. Officer Jamal said, his voice devoid of any remaining emotion. As the sole legal owner of this property, I am officially requesting that you remove these two trespassers from my home immediately. The sheriff nodded sharply. He unclipped his radio and signaled to the patrol car parked outside before stepping forward. He walked right past my mobility chair and approached the staircase. Ladies, the sheriff said, resting his hand on his utility belt. You heard the property owner. It is time to leave. You can gather your personal items under supervision later, but you need to vacate the premises right now. Patricia looked around the massive living room, searching for a single sympathetic face. She found absolutely none. The wealthy influencers she so desperately wanted to impress were looking at her with complete contempt. The family she tried to manipulate was standing against her. She looked at me sitting in my rigid spinal brace, surrounded by legal protection and undeniable truth. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I simply watched the inevitable consequence of her lifelong cruelty finally execute itself. Move, the sheriff commanded, his voice, leaving no room for argument. Patricia grabbed her designer purse with shaking hands. She reached down and pulled Brianna up by the arm of her tailored ivory gown. The two women, completely stripped of their power, their wealth, and their false dignity, walked slowly toward the front door. The crowd parted for them, not out of respect, but out of a desire to avoid any physical contact with them. David pushed my mobility chair backward, clearing the path to the door. Patricia and Brianna walked right past me. They stepped out of the warm, luxurious mansion and directly into the freezing, driving rain. They had no car keys, no secure bank accounts, and nowhere to go. The heavy oak doors slammed shut behind them, echoing with the sound of absolute finality. Jamal walked over to my mobility chair. He looked exhausted, but his eyes held a profound sense of gratitude. Thank you, Natalie, he said quietly, extending his hand. You saved my life today. I shook his hand firmly. You saved your own life, Jamal, I replied. I just gave you the audit. I looked up at David and nodded. It was time to go. David gripped the handles of my mobility chair and pushed me toward the private side exit. As we rolled down the ramp and into the waiting transport van, I took a deep breath of the cold, crisp night air. The heavy, crushing weight of family expectations, their manipulation, and their toxic abuse was completely gone. I was physically battered and facing a long medical recovery, but my spirit had never felt so incredibly light. I was finally victorious. I was finally safe. I was finally free. The ultimate lesson embedded within this harrowing journey is the profound realization that biological ties do not automatically equate to genuine love or unyielding loyalty. For years, Natalie suffered under the crushing weight of toxic family expectations, constantly attempting to prove her worth to people who were fundamentally incapable of valuing her. Her mother and sister weaponized guilt manipulation and outright financial abuse to maintain their false narrative while simultaneously draining her emotional reserves. The breaking point arrived not as a quiet realization, but as a brutal matter of life and death. When her family actively chose vanity and social status over her physical survival in a trauma unit, Natalie finally understood the dangerous reality of her situation. The story demonstrates that establishing ironclad boundaries is not an act of cruelty, but an absolute necessity for basic self-preservation. By stepping back and applying her professional analytical skills to her personal life, Natalie was able to dismantle a lifetime of gaslighting. She utilized financial independence and legal strategy as her ultimate shields, protecting her assets and exposing the severe fraud committed by her abusers. True freedom begins the exact moment you stop seeking validation from those who only wish to exploit you. You cannot heal in the same toxic environment that broke you, and sometimes the only way to win is to liquidate the bad investment and walk away completely. If you have ever had to set firm boundaries with toxic family members to protect your peace, let me know your story in the comments below and remember to like and subscribe.